Okay, so for this one, the first image right here has mostly entirely the shades of blue. So let's try to squeeze some blue right here. I'll try to follow a pattern of red, blue, and yellow color palette right here so that I can easily mix them up. And with your colors, sometimes, especially with gouache, it's important to have like a huge mixing plate. There we go. And now I see that this might be a little too bright. So let's try to add a couple of whites as well, because I see a lot of whites there. Let's just add the white here. You're going to be using a lot of whites, especially if with gouache. So you want to kind of invest on that color. And then you see that the blue here is kind of a little on the muted side. So what do we do to mute the color blue? We look at the color opposite to that. And the color opposite to blue is an orange. So since we don't have an orange yet, we're going to be mixing our own orange. So there's our red. I won't tightly squeeze the cap, I just realized, because I will be using it anyway later. Okay, our yellow right here. Whenever I use gouache, I also find that I use a lot of the paint. Because of the nature of gouache, you kind of want to have more of the paint as you go along the layers. Alright, so let's begin. First, I want to start with a blue layer. We understand that gouache works from dark to light, and you can always layer a light color on top of the black layer. But the danger with that is if you added a lot of your blacks underneath, as we can see here, you can easily activate or reactivate the layer underneath, especially if you put a lot of black. And that would mess up with your blues. So let's keep that kind of color right here. Alright, so I'm going to be using a filbert brush, a small one. So in this exercise, you don't have to make everything perfect. It just has to make sense to you. So let's just try to mix blue and a little bit of red, just a kiss of red. Oop, that was a little too much. Okay. And let's add some blue here. Okay. It's becoming muted already, but leaning towards the purple. So let's add a little bit of yellow, just because we mentioned earlier that we need to add the complement. And the complement was not complete because we just added red to it. Okay, now we can say that we have added an orange, and look at the color that we have. You can easily just grab a piece of paper and swatch that to see if you're happy with it. I think I can do with that. Just maybe add a little bit of white, so I'm just gonna kiss my brush with that and mix a portion of it here. Whenever I'm mixing, I find myself always using my wrist to really get into those mixes. And I feel like that kind of matches a little bit. It just adds a little bit more, needs a little bit more blue, right? We can probably bring back some of those blue again to add some sort of royal vibe to it. Careful not to add too much water, because we're not using watercolor anyway, which is what I did here. I think I added too much of the blue. Okay, I think just a little bit more. Okay. So you want to, whenever you're mixing, mix it in batches as well, because sometimes Like for example, I want to make a lighter version of this. I want to put that on this side, the white color, wash my brush, and just mix a portion of it here. That way I don't mix like the whole batch. So if I am unsuccessful in doing or mixing the whole thing, then at least I got the shade or some batches of it still available for mixing. Okay, I think I'm almost close to a happy color. When I say a happy color, because sometimes the colors that you're dealing with aren't exactly the shades of blue that you're supposed to be dealing with. Remember that we're using just 3 colors here. We're starting with 3 colors, and for you to be able to achieve a more accurate colors or schemes, or you to be able to achieve the colors that are closer to the subject, you have to have a split complementary palette. So in this one, it's not a split complementary, so I am just going to copy the pattern that we have here. So following the lines, I can take advantage of this end right here, the edge, because you know that when you pat it like that or layer it like that, it's going to create that kind of edge that is rounded. While that is helpful, you also have to think or consider that you're still going to be layering black beside it. Okay, so that's a little too bright compared to what we've mixed. This would have worked better. All right. Yeah, that would have worked better. Okay, I think I can add a little bit more of that. Okay, just gonna copy the exact thing there. And then for this one, this is a little more of this kind of shade as well. I'm gonna use the blue instead of a black, because this is a shade black, but if you layer it with black here, it just creates that stark contrast that is not really seen here. So how can I gauge this? From experience. Whenever I layer a white color on top of a black color, it's always that stark contrast, and you want to be gentle with your transitions here, because it just seems like there's a lot of white on top of it, and it's not like really overpowering. It's just like a subtle gradation of colors there. Alright, so I'm gonna let that layer dry, and while I'm doing that, I'm gonna use another brush, a flat brush this time. Doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna use a flat brush and mix. You see this kind of mixture? It's kind of watery for the black. It's just okay. And I'm just gonna lay down a stripe of black to separate those 2 sets of feathers there, because okay. And you can slowly introduce where the black areas are here. Okay. Now, I know it's still drying and it's starting to have that matte finish, so I'm gonna let that settle in and go back to it. So that's our first layer. Alright, we'll move forward to the next layer, which is this one. This looks a little hard to paint, but it's actually pretty easy. All you need to do is to squint. So when you squint, you kind of make things blurry for you, and when you do that, this part right here just looks like a bit of a shade of blue that leans a little bit to a purple, and then this looks like a brown, reddish brown color until it transitions to a dark, heavy brown, and this is a lighter version of the brown. So, and then you just need to add like all of these streaks right here. So let's just try to do that. Okay. This might work, but a little bit of red might work because we're talking about purple now, not just the blue that we have right here. There we go. Okay, so I am just going to copy that here. Alright, everything. And then I'm gonna add red with black, because that's like a shortcut for you to make a brown. Okay, am I happy with that? I think I am. Can be happy with that. All right. So right now I am, by the way, using a vellum board, which means this is lighter or smoother. Okay. I'm adding a bit of yellow to this brown mixture just because I feel like that has a little bit of warmth to it. Okay, just gonna add that right here. And then maybe a little bit of white. Just a kiss to kind of just offset that. Okay. You left a space here, no worries, because that's a portion where there's a dark part there. And so it doesn't really bother me if I don't actually complete it. I will, however, make this gradient smoother. There we have it. Okay, going back to our first piece. I'm going to be using a round brush this time. So with our round brush, I'm going to be choosing a color of blue. That is, we're going to be focusing on the light colors now. And I'm using it like a watercolor because later on I'll be adding more details for the textures. And it would help if you make the layer underneath more watery for the background, because if you layer like a thick paint underneath, then it'll just reactivate. And so if you add less water underneath, then that just makes it easier for you to kind of work around it if you made a mistake. So you notice that the color, some colors right here, some shades are not really showing up underneath that black, because the black that we laid here is a little too strong. So you just have to go back and forth, but being careful not to reactivate that area over there. I'm going to start suggesting some, textures at this side. Okay. And this is actually a good kind of suggestion. It's not like an overall suggestion that this is a feather right away, but it makes it easier for you, with that black underneath, it makes it easier for you to readjust your coverts. So I think I'm happy with that. I can do with that. I just need now to mix more of the white. But be careful though, because if you add more right now in this wet layer, I see that it's wet because it's still shiny, as you can see here. Yep. And so I'm just gonna have to focus on this one because this area is dry. So you can individually, do the strokes or copy the strokes right there. Like that. Or, alternatively, this is what I love about gouache. You can use a dry brush. So, wet the medium, or the brush, load it with just a few paints. So, you want your brush to not be sticking all together for the bristles. You want it to have this sort of bear claw kind of effect, or it's rather dry. And then, okay, well, it's not really affecting. Hold on, let me just mix again. Okay, there. Right. We wanted to have that kind of bear claw so that it's still kind of open and not sticking all together for the bristles. So I am gonna make swiping motion right here. If you see that it's kind of cracking, then it needs just a little bit of water to kind of assist or guide you with that fluidity. Oh, that's a little too much. But it's actually beautiful. Knowing that gouache actually dries lighter, then this might actually just, dry the right kind of color, with the right kind of color. Okay, but that's kind of like closing in a little too bit. You see that kind of area right here? Now, I want to reevaluate that part, because I feel like adding too much of those strokes, it created this clump. So I'm just going to interrupt them with layers of dark blue. Dark blue because apparently it's not showing up. So, okay, let's just mix it right here. Needs a little bit of water. Gouache is like working with oil. You have to color mix first. Unlike in watercolor, you can work your way around it. Okay, that's looking better. Now I'm just going to add another layer of white, because if you have your darks on top, that's what's kind of like striking. So let's just break it up again in a separate direction this time. There we go. I think that kind of does the suggestion already. Okay, so now I am going to go back with my round brush and use these to suggest the highlights, this part. So the coverts are kind of like divided into two with, if this was a leaf, it would be like a mid vein underneath, or in the middle. Okay. So I'm just gonna draw in the highlights. You don't have to think that much. Where do you see the light? Where do you see the white areas? That's what you paint. You don't have to think that the coverts have these two areas, but rather you just have to see where is the area that is white, where is the areas where I see, a lighter version of the blue, and that's what you paint. Okay, now some colors are just a little, tad lighter than the rest, because as it moves upward, it hits the light more. So I'm just going to paint what I see here. I see that this is a little lighter. Yep. Okay, this one's lighter here. I think that's okay. I'm squinting as I'm doing this. Okay, so let us now, again for the feathers over here, you may do some individual strokes, which is more intentional, or you can do the same technique we did earlier, which is the flat brush kind of technique. I want to do this just because, or use the round brush this time just because I feel like it's not all in one direction, and like right here, the coverts over here, it's curving upwards and there's not much space to kind of maneuver with the flat brush, so this should be okay. Alright, I think I should be done with that. Yeah. Okay, going back to this, since I'm already using the white, let's just try to use that. You see that kind of curving pattern? It resembles this round brush stroke wherein if you press on it, it goes a little thicker, right? So we're just going to have to imitate that because it's just a series of, that kind of stroke. And then the strokes up above are thinner than the ones below. So let's put less pressure on your round brush this time. Okay, now these are a little faded, so I'm just going to tap or pat my brush and my tissue to remove excess paints, and then see if I can work with the white that I have here. It's just literally layers of patterns. There we go. This is a little too strong, so I'm just gonna pat it dry even more. Okay, there we go. I think I can add more curvature to this, or less curvature. Yep. This might benefit from having a little bit of blending or gradation, so I'm kind of like disturbing what we have here. Okay, there we have it. Now, I would have added more blue at the top, but I think that alone already reflects or suggests a bleeding heart pigeon. Okay, so here is the video, which will talk about the rest of how to do the rest of these thumbnails over here. And so I have these palettes, which I have used for the painting of these two thumbnails. And so I'm going to be doing the rest of the thumbnails for now. Alright, so starting with this third thumbnail. So even if we layer, we can layer from light or from dark to light with gouache, it's always a good idea to still reserve some areas where there's white, especially if you understand that there's like a little bit of delineation with that. So especially for light colors, because I can't always just cover the whole thing black, but for make that kind of yellow stand out, it shouldn't have an undertone that is dark. So let me just do an example right here where there's a black color and compare it with one that doesn't have a black undertone, so just the pure yellow. So this is a very striking lemon yellow. This is a little bit of a warm yellow. Let's mix a little bit of red to that yellow that we have to create some orangish tones. There we go. That kind of yellow. Versus if I layered the whole thing black and then placed that layer of yellow on top. See, that kind of wouldn't show. Plus, there might be a danger of mixing that yellow with that black, which creates some sort of green. Okay, so let us first layer the whole thing with the lightest colors. So I'm going to be mixing my yellow, so I'm just going to grab some yellow here, a kiss of red. I say kiss just because the act of grabbing paint is just literally, very sparingly. Okay, I think that's okay. I'm just going to copy that whole line right here, because since there's no danger of kind of overlapping with that brown, the brown is like a dark color, I can just easily use an opaque shade with that. But this one, even if I can layer the whole thing yellow, maybe right here I can start like actually suggesting where those coverts are. So I'm just gonna start doing that. And I know that the line here tapers as it goes towards the top. So, but for now, we're just gonna have to like fill in those layers of yellow. I can also just fill in this whole area yellow, and then later on fill it in with black. Now this looks like a wet on wet thing going on here, so I'm just gonna have to add that black while it's still wet, or the layer is still fresh. So I'm just gonna add some black stroke. The strokes are kind of moving. It's not like in one direction, it's moving towards this from here, starting going to this direction. So we're just going to tilt that motion. It's not just unidirectional. So I'm going to do that and mix again a little bit of yellow just to kind of blend that in so that that black isn't too sharp. There we go. And then usually for a transition of different set of coverts, there's usually a harsh shadow. Especially, well, that depends on how it's actually layered, but in this case, there's a harsh shadow, so I'm just gonna layer that in. Oh, I actually made a mistake there. Okay, I'm just gonna use a brown brush. Okay, I made a mistake here because I forgot about this set of coverts over here. So that's pretty much an easy fix because you started lightly, and so it's not like really hard to get lost with all of those details. So I'm just gonna kind of re-establish that area over there. There we go. That's why it did not make sense. Okay. So for this one, I am now going to be using the black. So the blacks are kind of strong. It's a strong color, so you want to be careful of your choice. This is not a sharp brush. I'm going to use a flat brush instead, just because my round brush is not, cooperating, and it's like too chubby for me to use it for a very thin space. So I'm just going to copy those spaces over here. Yep. Nice. Yeah. So in that sense, you're painting the black areas, not the yellow areas. So that's what you want to keep in mind when you're painting this time the black areas. So just look at the black areas. You're going to be painting that, and then I'm going to cover a little bit of that white until this is where you can suggest the yellow areas that are kind of tapering. There you go. So you want to kind of open it up at an angle, so you're kind of painting some sort of triangles that have like rounded edge, if that makes sense. Okay. Then I'm gonna do these curving motions. Yep. Again, I'm not painting that yellow streak. I'm not going to see that as a yellow streak. I'm painting the black areas around it. I see some black areas here. Then a yellow feather-like area there. Okay, so now we're gonna use a brown. That brown has brown is a mixture for gouache, is a mixture of black and red, so that's gonna be like an easy mix here. That has a lot of red components, so I'm gonna mix something like that. Here, let's make a swatch first. I think that's okay, except it needs a little bit of white. Okay, let's just try to see if our white is okay. Yep, this is good. There's a little bit of covert kind of messing into the next layer, and you're done. That's pretty much it. Okay, next up we have here. This one's pretty easy too. It's just I see an orange layer, which I can re-establish with the highlights and the shadows. So let's try to mix that orange color. So we've mixed the orange earlier with the yellow and the red, but this time we're going to have more of the reds shining. How it looks like in the palette, since my palette is yellow, is going to be different with how it looks like here. See? So now I'm going to be adding more yellow or red. I think that matches it a little bit. Yeah. Do you think that that feels like more of the middle tone? When I say middle tone, it's not the darkest tone, which is right here. It's not also the lightest tone. It's somewhere in the middle. I think I need a little bit of yellow again, just because it feels too harsh. Yeah, that's okay. Actually, let's just try to mix a portion of red here. whenever you're loading a strong color like the red, before dipping into the light color, which is the second color you're mixing it with, you want to wash it first so that it kind of like really shows up as a good mixture. Something's lacking. Maybe just a little bit of blue to tone it down. Nope, that made it green. Maybe this. Black. Nope. Yeah, I think that's okay. Tad brighter. Okay, so I'm just gonna cover the whole thing orange. Yep. This orange I have right here is a little zestier than the one I have here, the left in the original. You see some white portion over there where the orange has overlapped? It's actually a little bit blue, right? So I'm just gonna cover that in. Oops. That's the danger of having this layer of orange laid down first. Okay, so that's it. I'm not going to be drawing that dark part, so I'm just going to focus on this. Alright, next. We're going to mix a little bit of red, or more red. Yep. Ooh, that's actually nice. Okay, I'm going to use my brush, and whenever I'm using a flat brush to create those kinds of textures, because it kind of resembles that, right? I want to make sure that my flat brush, or any brush actually, just flat brushes are more uniform. I want to make sure my flat brush has this kind of bristles where it's separate a little bit. It's not that kind of bristle where it's like all clumped together. So I'm just going to have to start from the bottom and try to practice how it naturally looks like. Does this feel natural? That is okay, except for the fact that you're dealing with something that's not even. It's kind of like going on a zigzag pattern here. So I want to try to copy that. So if you started with this, that's okay. You can actually just, like, you know, add a couple of lines that are going sideways or outside. So, or you can just tilt your brush so that you can do that zigzag pattern. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to do both depending on where I see it applicable. Okay, so these are lines, remember, that are kind of like tilting. So I'm just gonna do that. And my strokes might be a little different than what I have here because my brush is big. Okay, let's make it a little darker this time. Okay. Now you see that? It's kind of like clumping all together. That's why I'm patting it here, the excess water. You're not patting just the pigment, but the excess water that's there, because that's what's going to keep you from creating those nice textured effects. And I'm holding my brush so that it's actually, you know, leaning or touching really softly, like, again, like a kiss. Okay, I'm just going to make those marks right there. It's moving in one direction and then to the other. Then there's a lighter version, like the mid-tone, remember? Right here that kind of overlaps with the blue. So for you to be able to bring those back, you're probably thinking, oh no, that's kind of like a little too much already. Well, we've painted the shadows, the darkest areas. Now we're going to be painting the lights, starting with this area here. And the reason why I did that is so that you can layer this on the side. So I am gonna go back with a lighter yellow. and then mix it with orange or white. Actually more. Okay, so I see highlights here. Also here. Also here. Okay. So the trick is not to actually just, copy the exact thing that you see, but rather suggest what is there. In scientific illustrations, of course, it's very important to keep or to have everything perfectly copied, but since this is just a thumbnail exercise, it's for you to gauge how well you're doing in terms of color mixing and copying the techniques. Right. I think I can do away with that just because okay, let me just add back the light. Okay, I can do away with this just because I feel like my brushes are too big for the space that I have right here. If I was working probably with a smaller brush, I would have achieved a more zoomed out version. Because what I think I'm seeing here is a zoomed in version of what I have here. Okay, so I think I'm happy with that. All right. So I'm going to be doing the rest of these videos in time lapse, and I'll probably just cover it with music, and you just need to observe what I'm doing right here so that you can copy. Okay, and I think we're finished. So these are all of the patterns that we did, and that's basically pretty much the easiest of this one. And that's basically all that you need to learn about some of the common patterns in the bird wing structure that you'll need to know so that you can use your proper gouache techniques, color mixing, and brushwork practices to apply it here. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that you were able to get or to learn a lot of techniques today. And if you have any questions, feel free to message me at on Instagram at Dear to Our Hearts, or on Facebook, that's also Dear to Our Hearts. And if you will be posting your works as well, please feel free to tag me as well on Instagram and on Facebook. But I'm more active on Instagram, so that's going to be at Dear to Our Hearts. Thank you so much.